Thank you to Matthew for those thoughts. We'll have more climate change takes throughout the show. Now back to the line in our countdown to the top 5 stories of the year. Coming in at number 3 is, coincidentally enough, climate change and its impacts here in New Mexico. The drought conditions just keep rolling on. We've got the Rio Grande drying in parts of Albuquerque this summer, and fire officials are bracing for a terrible wildfire season next year. Julianne, experts tell us there's already permanent change in New Mexico due to rising temperatures. But is dealing with climate change still a big enough priority for policymakers in the state? What's your take on that?
I mean, I would say the policymakers in the state could never spend too much time dealing on climate change, especially when it comes to New Mexico's water supplies, which we know have not been really, managed and regulated in a way that's equitable for everyone. We are in big trouble with our use of Colorado River water. We're in litigation with the state of Texas. I think that the more our local policymakers could spend on it, the better.
Mm-hmm. Dan, lawmakers have taken up a lot of bills in the last couple of years on this. There's no doubt about it. I mean, everything from a task force to study the renewable energy job market to the governor's landmark Energy Transition Act. But at the same time, we're still hugely reliant on fossil fuels.
Yeah, that's certainly this tension that has arisen in Santa Fe over the last few years is that the oil and gas industry is almost like the checking account for the state. I mean, that, people in the Southeast, I think, feel like they provide all the revenue and people up north spend all the money. And there's definitely this tension over, transitioning to renewable energy while also trying to support the industry that is providing so much of the state budget. There are also complaints about whether the state is, doing enough. The state engineer, the chief water official recently announced that he would step down. And part of his complaint had to do with a lack of resources for what he sees as, water priorities in the state.
Jessica, Dan set it up well about your part of the world. How has the climate change conversation changed in your region?
Well, I think Dan said it really well when he said that we feel that we make the money down here and Santa Fe spends it. I think that's kind of the pervading feeling. Now, I think that part of that is the fact that we don't talk enough about how the oil and gas industry itself is doing work to address climate change and its impact on the state and in the Permian Basin. The real conversation down here is talking about all of the scientific and actually facilities put in place that will help them reduce their impacts on New Mexico's skies, on New Mexico's water, and when it comes to pollution across the board.
Algernon, how does New Mexico go about threading this needle, this classic problem between feeding the state coffers we're talking about with oil and gas money, while trying to curb greenhouse gas emissions and other things that make quality of life, important?
I think the real difficult part of this conversation is that we're talking about a kind of a transition period where we can diversify revenue streams as well as how we're getting energy into our grid. And that might mean adjustments for a period of time. And I think we're talking a generation or two in terms of not only the revenue picture, but also just what our expectations are as far as the energy that allows us to live the kind of daily life that we like to live. That doesn't necessarily point to scarcity or a kind of catastrophic scarcity of energy, but I think that there's probably going to be adjustments to what we see, how much we drive, how we get that power and how we pay for it, as well as how the state generates the revenue it needs to do schooling, medical services, and all of the things that state funding supports.
Hey, Julianne, can I get you to peel back to the Texas situation for a quick second? I think a lot of folks don't realize how huge this is for us. We've been at this for a number of years about what we owe the state, what we don't owe the state, and there's been accusations that New Mexico has not fought hard enough so far in this issue. What's your sense of where we are with this Texas situation?
Well, I think that's one of the issues. Dan brought up that the state engineer is stepping down at the end of the year. And this state engineer has been, tasked with cooperating with the Attorney General's office to deal with this massive litigation that is in the United States Supreme Court. And it really boils down to this idea of, what do upstream users owe downstream users? And so this argument is that, has New Mexico done enough to send the right amount of water to Texas? Or are we just sort of this victim of circumstance that we're not getting enough water, from the upstream here? There's a lot of nuance in the Supreme Court case. And one of the issues has to do with pumping of groundwater adjacent to, the Rio Grande and the Pecos River in southern New Mexico, and whether those actions that have been allowed by the state engineer had such an adverse effect on the river and on those downstream deliveries that, in fact, New Mexico is responsible for that. And so those are just some of the issues that are being litigated. And this is not going to be the only big water case. There was a big study that was released this week about users of the Colorado River, and the upstream users are shafting the downstream users, and that's the story across the West.
Dan, politically, what's the bounce here? I mean, water, it's been an old joke forever that, we go to war here in the West over water and maybe one other thing. But we have problems. We have a very definite problem. It's going to be really taking a lot of money out of our wallet if we let this sort of get out of control. So let me go back to that question I asked Julianne. This idea that New Mexico has not fought hard enough here. I hear that all the time. What are you hearing on that front?
Yeah, there are some prominent legislators who really feel like the state has not done a good enough job protecting its interests in court. I don't have the expertise to say whether that's a valid claim or not, but there is definitely some nervousness among the legislature about the outcome of these cases, and how well New Mexico has done advocating for New Mexicans.
Is it a resource issue, Dan? Do we just need to throw more money at it, or what's the missing piece here that you're hearing?
That's a good question. Resources are not going to be a good excuse for the legislature going forward, given the volume of money that is pouring into the state from various stimulus packages, federal legislation, and the oil industry is also really pouring in some money. But yeah, we'll have to see. I feel like people are going to be less inclined to give the state a break when it comes to lack of resources.
Good point there. And now we're up to our second biggest story of 2021, education in a pandemic. Schools did reopen to in-person learning this year, of course, but enrollment is still down in our public schools. And there have been plenty of hiccups with MARC requirements, COVID outbreaks, and of course, learning loss. It's not a unique situation to New Mexico, certainly, but in hindsight, Julianne, did we do the right thing by reopening schools in April?
I think the number of parents who said that their children were being adversely affected with educational and social outcomes was really what drove that decision. I think, again, like is always the story, the kids who come from places where they have slow and low internet, and they have little or no technology assistance available to them. Those are the kids that suffered the most from the remote only learning. And so I think that making the argument that sending everyone back to school to attempt to keep working on equity for education for everyone was the right move. We saw the LFC reported in the fall that New Mexico students lost between 10 and 60 days of education because of the pandemic, because of, not being able to access the internet from home, or having 3 kids trying to use the same connection at the same time. There were, I think, a variety of challenges for every family, but that is a big gap to overcome. And those analysts for the legislature said that for many students, for the students that lost the most days, you're looking at it taking like 6 years for them to catch up on that lost time.
Wow.
So think about how that affects your third grader, who in New Mexico is already historically inclined to be behind, right? So our students at elementary school pre-pandemic, 37% of them were learning at grade level. Wow. Post-pandemic, that number dropped to 31%. I would argue both of those numbers are pretty shameful.
Interesting points there. Jessica, a common theme in a lot of our stories this year, of course, is the urban-rural divide, and that has definitely been true with how schools, and especially school boards, have reacted to the mask mandates. I mean, what do we need to do as a state to get more on the same page? And I'm going to put you on the wall here. In your part of the state, I mean, I've been down south a lot this past summer for various reasons. Ooh, man, the mask thing was such a hot point down there.
Yeah, we have this huge aversion to wearing masks because we're told to wear masks, apparently.
Right.
But I think that in our school district, you will find people want to do what is right to protect the health and wellness of our children, but they want to see that decision come from locals. So if you're looking at our local school districts, you'll hear them say a lot of our local superintendent says, hey, we're not the mask police, but we are asking you kindly to do this. And if not, you have another option, which is to take your child into remote learning, which they still offer. But I think that part of the biggest problem for us is saying we want to see that control back in the hands of our local school districts, of our local superintendents. We want parents to have more of an input. As Julianne said, there was parents who said, hey, this is adversely affecting our children. We want to see them back in a classroom. I think if you go back and ask parents now whether they regret moving their child from remote back into in-class learning, they'll say no, absolutely not. We think this is the path forward for us.
Algernon, students age 5 to 11, of course, can now be vaccinated. How do you think that changes the game in our state? Are parents hearing this and the numbers pointing out that they're taking care of business here?
So initially, there was a pretty good jump. It exceeded the State Department of Health's expectations as far as parents wanting to get their kids some protection against COVID-19. And the more warm bodies that are vaccinated, the more of a kind of a firewall we have as far as slowing down the spread and the mutation of the virus. The numbers indicate that has slowed down some, but there's still a pretty strong participation in that. I think it's, as Jessica was pointing out, I think people are motivated to make certain decisions, but they may be less motivated when it's a directive and when they're told to do it. And there's a tricky balance there because there will, of course, be people who decide not to participate in something that arguably has a broad impact on our ability to restore some of what we used to consider normal.
Dan, interesting point there, because colleges and universities, including UNM right here, have also issued vaccine mandates for student, faculty, and staff after some back and forth and getting public input. Was that a prudent course of action in hindsight?
Well, I mean, it's difficult for me to, answer that or opinion, offer an opinion on that. I do think that, it seems like based on all the evidence we have that vaccines are the most powerful tool to slow the spread of the disease, to keep people from, reduce the severity of the disease when people do get it. So I think you're seeing some, a response to that basically these, the vaccines, certainly based on the evidence we have, they seem to be effective and the best weapon we have.
Julianne, boosters. UNM is mandating those as well. Others are as well. Is this going to be another flashpoint here?
Well, I think the state has given some conflicting messaging about what they're going to consider full inoculation. Is it going to be all three, 2 plus a booster for all age groups? And, are different agencies going to adopt different, definitions of full inoculation? I think that remains to be seen. In Santa Fe, we're at 99% vaccination among adults.
Wow.
And I think that it's, the aversion to the vaccine and the people who absolutely won't get it, who won't consider the boosters, it's really not as much of a factor in our community, I think, as it is in many other places.
Same for 5 to 11? Is Santa Fe is doing well there as well?
We are. I don't know the number off the top of my head. And I'm not sure, actually, we don't have a county by county breakdown yet for the kids.
Yeah.
Right.
A little early. Okay. Jessica, I got to say, the question now is how we move forward and try to make up for the learning loss that we mentioned earlier over the last 2 years that Julianne mentioned. What should educators and policymakers be thinking about at this point?
Well, let me just say that there are still a lot of challenges to now to actually getting us to a place where we can get caught up. We have a lot of teachers still out of the classroom. We have a lot of substitute teachers in place where there should be full-time teachers. We have lack of resources. We have missing kids. If you guys are watching the news, you know that there are just children who've disappeared out of our school system that we need to find and make sure are safe and can come back to school system. And I think in the future, what we need to do is really just kind of button down and pay a lot of attention to the data that we're getting. Where are our children lacking in terms of learning? We have consistently been at the bottom of education as a state. I don't think anybody is realistically expecting us to catch up overnight or to get back to where we should have been. I think most of us are going to be pretty happy if we can just keep kids in the classroom moving forward and learning.
Good point there. Dan, I'm curious what you're hearing at the Roundhouse about the idea of extended school years. Anybody talking about that up there?
Yeah, that has been a huge issue.
Wow.
The nonpartisan legislative analysts who evaluate education policy have basically repeatedly told the legislature that, time on task, extending learning hours, that those are powerful tools for helping people catch up. And there are some programs that do that. The difficulty has been getting school districts to participate. Teachers are exhausted. They don't want to add, an extra 5 years to the school year or 5 weeks to the school year. It's been difficult to implement it on the ground. But in some ways, legislators have some tools they're considering, financial incentives, they could try something mandatory. I don't know, but this is, one of the most important issues facing the state is how to improve the school system.
Next up on the line, the moment you've all been waiting for, our top story of 2021. Right now, though, some more thoughts on climate change and environmental justice in New Mexico. Our next special guest is Valerie Rangel, author and professor of earth science at Santa Fe University of Art and Design.